Translating the Dissidia Final Fantasy games that originated on the PSP system to the PS4 was never going to be easy. The original and its sequel, Dissidia Duodecim, were some of the most feature-rich games, not only on a handheld, but possibly of all time. But now with the new game having more of an online multiplayer focus, in an era of microtransactions and incomplete games, Square Enix and developer Team Ninja have more ways than ever to mess this one up. But did they? The core gameplay of Dissidia Final Fantasy NT remains largely the same as its predecessors. This is a fighting game where you play as one of the protagonists or antagonists of the mainline Final Fantasy games, with some more obscure characters thrown in there for good measure. Each character has a set of attacks which build bravery, allowing you to do an increasing amount of damage with powerful and unblockable HP attacks, at which point your bravery resets to its default value. Watch out though, as your bravery decreases when hit with a bravery attack, and a huge bonus is given to those who whittle their opponent's bravery down to 0. This is usually the tipping point of any fight. The movesets of the characters themselves have been streamlined. The player can no longer tweak and customise beyond choosing a HP attack and 2 abilities. These abilities usually take the form of an area of effect buff or debuff, and are available to all characters. It is by no means a bad thing though that each character now has a permanent moveset, as Team Ninja has done a superb job in balancing the roster of characters. Where before certain characters like the Emperor were hard to get to grips with due to there being so much choice of sometimes complex moves, in this game each character is similar enough that it's easy to pick up and play with any character, yet everyone still has a distinct feel and playstyle to them. To complement that, there are also a few summons to choose from which give various kinds of buffs, but can only be called after destroying crystals that appear around the stage. Once called, they have the potential to wreak havoc on the other party. The way these summons zip around the stage is the most visually stunning aspect of Dissidia NT. They were also the cause of some of the most intense and action-packed moments in my time with the game. Succeeding takes more than just learning your own character though. Knowing what your enemy is capable of goes a long way. In doing this, you can stay just out of the enemy's reach whilst hurling long-range magic at them, or use the game's incredibly satisfying dodging mechanics to draw them in for close-range attacks. Decent players will know, for instance, that it's a bad idea to stand underneath Cloud or Noctis, as they will undoubtedly launch a quick downward thrust. Tidus is another character that can catch inexperienced players off guard. His main attacks branch out from a dash, and are often preceded by a dodge. Attacks can be strung together by hitting opponents against walls, or timing a dash just perfectly so that their recovery coincides with your follow-up strike. This time you won't be fighting alone. A basic match consists of 2 teams of 3, and supporting each other with buffs or interrupts increases your score. The score doesn't have any bearing on the outcome though. The victor is the team who incapacitates any of the opponent's team a total of 3 times. The single player AI is always a huge worry with these kinds of games, and is almost always either too hard or too easy. The PSP games had incredible AI, which had several tiers to it. The highest tier posed an incredible challenge, but nevertheless remained fair, and it seems that Dissidia NT has managed to keep that tricky balance intact. At times it can be frustrating when an enemy dodges perfectly even though their focus is on another character or place. It also annoys me when enemies constantly run away when they know they're about to lose, but hey, that happens online too. The game delivers information to the player through an interface which is much improved from the garish and utterly huge arcade UI. There's still an option to use the original, but I really do think the arcade UI is one of the most convoluted, typically Japanese interfaces I've ever seen. What the game does not do is give the player any resource whatsoever to look up what each character's individual moves do. This is important because many moves are context sensitive, requiring button holds, dashes or specific conditions like Shantoto's enraged effect to execute. Each character also has a unique ability which work on a timer like other abilities. Warrior of Light, for example, can use Holy Chain, which forces nearby enemies to target you. I still wouldn't know this, however, if I hadn't looked it up online. The game is in dire need of an encyclopedia detailing every move in the game, otherwise you can only learn most characters effectively by trial and error. There are an array of stages from various Final Fantasy games, but again, they don't work as the previous Dissidia stages worked. There are no destructible environments, and the stages seem far less intricate, with barely any verticality. It's clear that Team Ninja wanted to do away with Dissidia's more complex level design to focus entirely on the combat. A mistake in my opinion, but I can see where some people would prefer this. I see no reason why traps couldn't have been implemented in some of the stages, and more than anything else, I hope this is included in a later update. As well as playing online, there is a story mode, though it is by far the most disappointing aspect of Dissidia Final Fantasy NT. It consists of a small number of standard battles, as well as some boss fights against the game's summons. These boss fights are frustrating. The combat is clearly not designed around this kind of fight, and you pretty much have only two options: cheese the hell out of the AI or get lucky. The game outright tells you that close quarters characters are the most effective here, but this simply is not the case, as usually staying far away from the summon is the only way of avoiding its incredibly cheap attacks. There is no world map in the story mode, no dungeons with different ranks of chess pieces governing the challenge of encounters. Here we have a few branches of a very simple, very boring story, which can be gradually unlocked by playing online. Looking at this story map, you might think that its various paths correspond to time as they follow on to the right, but certain characters appear in multiple nodes in the same column with no discerning what happens first. So the layout of the map is completely arbitrary, and this may be the least creative way the story could have possibly been delivered. And damn, is it delivered through some terribly voice acted shells of characters we know and love. Voice acting in Dissidia NT is either wooden and devoid of any emotion, intensely shrill and annoying, or just... huh?
I ask you this, do you now believe in our might?
The worst offender is the Moogle, which constantly shrieks tips at the player. Luckily, you can turn this off during the battles, which I did immediately after my first one, but unfortunately you can't just kill the Moogle outright.
Stick close to your companions, KUPO! Use your skills, KUPO! Go crush that core, KUPO! Your enemies will summon soon, KUPO! Use your skills, KUPO! Stick close to your companions, KUPO! Your enemies will summon soon, KUPO!
The voice acting and sound design in general is also not even recorded very well, with ear-piercing sibilance, unbalanced sound effects, and some that are simply devoid of all impact. Most of the voice actors seem to have forgot what their characters sounded like in previous games. They weren't that great before, but now they're even worse. Most of the characters have the exact same generic American accent, but there are some exceptions of course. Shantoto and Kefka are the most entertaining, as not only do their voice actors have license to add a lot of panache, Shantoto says everything in rhyme and Kefka is just plain crazy. They also make you forget how dull the rest of the characters are. You can tell how shallow and simplistic the story is by the majority of dialogue, which never seems to go beyond one-line cliches. Hello, Cloud. It is good to see you again. We must press onwards. We can do anything if we stand together. Whatever. I work alone. It's better that way.
I don't care what anyone says. I am a real knight.
I am X-Death. I will control the power of the void. Don't be ridiculous. I am X-Death. You are Golbez. What? I thought I was X-Death. No, you are similar, but I am wearing a much better outfit than you, and I have the power of the void.
I am a real knight.
Luckily, the story is not the only way the game conveys progress to the player. This is something that most fighting games fall down on, but Dissidia NT does a really reasonable job. Items are given to the player frequently through treasure, essentially a loot box with no option to pay real money, thank Odin. Collectibles include a nice array of outfits and weapons, more variety and music to be heard in battles, and finally icons you can display on your character card featuring tons of characters from all the Final Fantasy games. These items are nowhere near the number found in previous Dissidia games, which featured thousands of combinations of armour, weapons and accessories, though admittedly none of those change character appearance. So, though I was expecting a bit more, seeing weapons like Cloud's Force Stealer in the game is exciting. It would be a shame to ruin it with something like Ultima Weapon paid DLC, which I'm sure Square Enix are well on the way with. Finally, the music, which is mainly Nobuo Uematsu compositions, arranged by Takeharu Ishimoto. The main theme, however, composed by Ishimoto, has seen a pretty epic makeover. The main melody of this never gets old, and good thing too, because you'll be hearing it on loop whilst preparing for matches. A lot can be said about just this track actually, compared to the original arrangement of the theme. I always thought it had more impact returning to the D every time like this. The new version has a descending run at the end of its first time round, then the second time round it reaches its peak before another descending run. These descending motifs almost make the track feel more repetitive, despite technically being less so. But I always thought that the track would be better off with another kind of repeating motif that gives it a bit more attitude, I'd say. What do you think? The fact that many of the world map tracks have already been arranged by Ishimoto for the PSP games just makes me think more of the missed opportunities surrounding the game's story mode. But of course, I don't need to say much more about the iconic Final Fantasy music on offer in the battles of Dissidia NT. It never fails to get me humming along. In the end, though I could complain endlessly about what I didn't get from this game, what I did get was one of the most varied yet balanced fighting games around. Mechanically, the game feels smooth as butter to play. Most of the game's flaws, such as poor sound direction, can be chalked down to Square Enix's usual laziness and cost-cutting antics. I am incredibly glad that the game was given to Team Ninja because, as we all know, Square Enix have forgotten how to make games, and this game in the hands of one of their studios would have been a complete disaster. I really hope the online community can continue to thrive, because this is a game I see myself returning to regularly. I've been Jake of theretroperspective.com. Please subscribe if you enjoyed this video.